Hey guys, today we're going to talk about one of my favorite themes in chess, which is identifying and stopping the opponent's ideas. I really love this theme because I think it gets to what chess is about as a strategy game. And there are different levels to this theme. When you're a beginner, it's enough to just notice when your opponent is attacking your pieces or threatening you with checkmate and stop their plans. Of course, as you get more advanced, your opponent's ideas are going to be more nuanced and you're going to have to stop a lot more subtle things. So we're going to be talking about some of these higher level plans of the opponent in these two examples from a student of mine. In this first example, we have a very well-known pawn structure where white has an extra e pawn compared to black's b pawn. So white has an advantage in the center, and they were familiar with this pawn structure and had no problem finding this move pawn to f3. Well, if you've ever seen the game Botvinnik Capablanca, 1938, a very famous game, you will know that Botvinnik introduced this pawn move and the whole concept of advancing in the center very effectively, and it became one of the most well-known games in chess history. If you haven't seen it, I recommend you look it up. So now black played the move h5. I think this is a little bit of a strange move. In a way, it's typical when the knight goes to g3, as it often does in these positions, to prepare the e4 push. Then you push the h pawn. But it's definitely pretty weird to do that move if the knight's not even there. It is a committal move where you're pushing pawns by your king. And now white played the move queen e1, which is actually a really nice queen maneuver to the part of the board where there is certainly going to be some action. And so the queen emerged over here, black captured, white captured towards the center, and black played knight e7. So this is the position that we are interested in. So what should white do? Yeah, well, first of all, guys, the key is to ask yourself, why did my opponent just play that move, right? So the knight was on c6, it went backwards, what's the point? And then you will understand that it's all about the f5 square. So either the bishop is planning to go there or the knight, but most likely the bishop, because it would be great to trade the light squared bishop for the one on d3. Obviously, white's light squared bishop is one of their most powerful pieces, pointing at the king, right? So this is the opponent's idea. But now, how should we deal with it? Right, this gets a little tricky. A very popular choice here has been this move for my students. Of course, it's logical, pushing in the center, but there's a little problem because when the opponent takes and then also makes a very logical move, knight g6, you realize that you have a problem with both your queen and the e4 pawn because the queen needs to be protecting the pawn. And you don't have a great solution here. You could offer up an endgame with queen g3, but the game is going to kind of go in a pretty unclear direction after h4. And you can also go queen g5 and just give up your e-pawn and take the h-pawn. And definitely, the position is still very sharp, but black objectively is not doing badly. So black can consider this to be a successful outcome for them. So e4 has this problem that you're going to wind up with issues with the e4 pawn. So what else can we do? I've had students suggest this move, stopping anyone from coming to f5. But of course, you can't just see a move that looks nice and play it. You have to think about what your opponent's going to do. If you play that move, is there any drawback of moving the knight there? Well, there's no drawback to the knight itself. There's no drawback to this queen, who doesn't have that many squares, but enough. But there is a real drawback on the c-file because the knight used to be protecting that square and now he's not, and black can take advantage of it with that double attack. And I find that pretty funny how an innocuous looking knight move, very sensible, can simply lose you the game because we didn't look one move ahead to see what the opponent can attack. So yeah, there are a lot of pitfalls in chess, guys, and that's why you always need to look at least one move ahead for your opponent, no matter how sensible you think that your move is. Now, there's knight f4. Now, this one doesn't have the same issue as knight g3 because the knight's still protecting the bishop. We're trying to attack that pawn, but unfortunately, bishop f5. I mean, we didn't stop their move. Now we don't have time to take their pawn because the bishop is hanging. If we wind up trading with them, then their knight activates and our queen is hanging, our pawn is hanging, and we definitely will not see it as a good sign if our queen has to start retreating. Okay, so we have identified the opponent's idea, and we've also tried a couple of moves that are not working ideally. So what else is left? And the move is queen g5. Simple and strong, right? It takes control of the f5 square. The queen herself is very stable on this square. She can't really be attacked. Obviously, this attack doesn't count with the knight because then you just lose your pawn. So basically, the queen gets to be really active, and you're even kind of getting out of this possible attack because now you can go e4 without worrying about that. So you keep all the advantages of your position. As you stop your opponent's idea, you're actually making your pieces better, right? So you're just hitting so many targets that we want to achieve in chess with one single move. That obviously, once you see all the good points behind it, you realize, yes, this is the best, most effective move in the position. And, you have the advantage of the two bishops. Black has this weak pawn on h5. You got the plan of pushing in the center. I mean, you can now go on to win the game with all your strategic advantages and not having let your opponent play their main idea. In the game, White unfortunately played bishop d2. Well, developing is nice, yes, but not if you're not stopping your opponent's ideas. And then the game became a lot more unclear as Black was able to achieve that trade. So now we're going to move on to our next example, guys. And this is a King's Indian. You might recognize it from the fianchettoed bishop on g7, closed up by the pawn. Of course, a little bit of an unusual King's Indian because White hasn't castled yet, but, well, for the King's Indian, it's typical enough. And now Black plays rook c8. So again, you might want to look at your opponent's move and think about why they did it and what they're planning to do next. Well, the rook is lined up with the queen. So is that a problem? Well, not in a direct way, but there is actually an idea of knight a4. So that's fairly direct. But there's also another idea of b5, right? It's maybe something you wouldn't really notice unless you had some experience in these positions. But yes, Black wants to play on the queen side where they just have the open file and they have this knight, and they would really love to destabilize the knight on c3. So a very popular move in this position, played not just in the game, but also when I had students practice this position, was the move h4, right? Of course it's logical. Yes, it's exactly what you do when this pawn is an anchor. You push up the h pawn, you try to open the h file and attack. But the problem is that b5 is something that is going to be annoying for White because you really can't touch this pawn with your bishop or your knight. Ultimately, the queen gets exposed, and there's going to be a discovery, which is going to destroy your center. And yeah, you're never going to get around to your attack on the king side. So you don't even have time to go with h5 because they're going to go b4. They're going to chase this knight away. And again, the tactics on the c file will start. So if you do arrive in this position, you're going to have to do things like maybe queen b1, but it's so unfortunate, right? I mean, it's not obviously not a move you want to do. It's very awkward, kind of passive looking. So wouldn't it just be better if we stopped the opponent's ideas before they got so dangerous to us? I mean, after rook c8, can't we just spend one move dealing with the opponent's threats? And if we want to do that, well, that would be a4. We actually stopped both knight a4 and b5 in one go. So 2 ideas stopped with 1 move. So what are the downsides of this move? Any downsides? Well, you're pushing a pawn. You could say that maybe you're weakening the b4 square. But on the other hand, you're also gaining better control of b5 as an outpost for your pieces in the future. And even if black decides to get a knight here, yeah, it's not too big of a deal. Your queen can move away to b3, or even, I would say, if the knight moves, knight c4 looks pretty nice to me. And if the knight gets here, just queen d2. So that way you get to stay in the center. You have a beautiful knight on c4. And this king, well, he's safe in the center for now because the center is closed. And I think that f2 would be a perfectly nice square for him in the future. And then when you have established control, your opponent's ideas are not really going anywhere, then of course we do want to use moves like h4, h5. By the way, I just want to warn you about something you definitely shouldn't be doing. And I had a student in this position play this move. Yeah, oh no. No, guys. You do not want to attack your opponent's pieces without thinking about where they're going to go. There is no point to an attack if you're only pushing their pieces to better squares. And in this case, black just goes there and their knight is extremely happy. Because even though this is the side of the board, but he's got great squares to get off the side of the board. And then you're like completely blocked with your own play on the H-file. So you definitely don't want to rush with things like that. So yeah, I would encourage you guys to pay a lot of attention to your opponent's moves, no matter how innocuous, right? You want to look at the move, try to understand the point, try to understand what they're going to do next, and decide whether or not it's important for you to deal with their idea. Not everything in chess needs to be stopped. We don't have to play prophylactic moves on every turn, but certainly it's a pretty key component of chess to be paying attention to what your opponent is doing and to be thinking about whether or not a reaction is appropriate. So, and when the opponent has some major ideas of counterplay, that's when you definitely got to be alert and start thinking about how to stop it. You know, if you feel like their ideas are pretty integral to their play, to begin, to a creation of counterplay, to improving their pieces, those things are major things that you want to pay attention to. So I hope, guys, that this video will help you to be more aware of what your opponent is doing and will make you try to find these satisfying solutions where you're stopping their ideas.